Hello, welcome to the first episode of GeekAut, the podcast for people with autism and people without autism to talk about the things they love in geekdom. I'm Owen Mason, and as far as I know, I didn't do a 10-page memo about how sexism is too rampant against white men. And today I'm being joined by two people who may not do this after this because of that horrible introduction. Hand you over. Whoever wants to introduce themselves.
Let me introduce myself. Hello, I'm Al. I'm one of the co-hosts of the GeekAut podcast.
They're listening to the GeekAut podcast. They don't need you to say that.
Well, proper introductions, my friend. Proper introductions. Also, I'm 33 years old. I live in the Netherlands with my wonderful girlfriend, Kim. And I'm a neurodiverse media critic. And you, Simone?
Hello, my name is Simone, and I'm also on the spectrum, and I'm also a media critic, and I'm also a game developer. I'm an indie game developer. You have not heard of me, and you have not played any of my games yet, so don't worry about that. But I'm one of the two people known as Plump Devs, which has a butt as its logo because butts.
Butts are good.
Very nice.
And Owen, what about you?
And I am a journalism graduate who I guess I'd consider myself a media critic because I've done that sometimes. But right now I am doing a web development course at the same time as trying to get back into the journalistic media stuff. Get back into that because it's a cool thing to be a part of. So glad we got the introductions out of the way. I almost ruined it with my intro, but that's why it's the first episode. People are allowed to have that. So we are going to try something a little not different, but something more descriptive. Because you're listening to this new podcast, you've heard of 3 different people who some of you may know, some of you may not know. So we're going to take this opportunity right now to each of us talk about our diagnosis, about where we came from and how we ended up liking the things we like and doing the things we do.
Well, I guess I'll start, being the extravagant person that I am. I went and got myself diagnosed after flunking my second attempt at college, because it was weird. I tried 2 courses. First I tried social work, and after that I tried cultural education. And both times I flunked in the first year, and I couldn't figure out why, because I wasn't failing my exams, I wasn't failing short essays. What I was failing were long-term essays, things you have to plan over multiple months, and I couldn't deal with my schedule changing every couple of months. So that was very frustrating, and I went out and got myself psychologically tested. And during the test, after the test result, there was an indication for autism, and I got forwarded, or referred to, I should say, to the Autism Expertise Center in my city, and I got diagnosed further there, and the result of that was Asperger's, which is now irrelevant because now it's all autism spectrum syndrome. So that's where my diagnosis came from.
Okay. Well, that was a nice story. You first originally got Asperger,
Yep.
right? And that's no longer, for those who don't know, that's no longer a disorder. It's now called ASD, right? Autism Spectrum Disorder.
Yeah.
As Alvin mentioned.
It's a very gradual thing that I don't know if it's fully confirmed yet, but there was always that intention to do that because it didn't make sense if... Well, as we talked about with the naming of the show, I guess, that it didn't make sense in that wider context to put that segregation forward, and when it doesn't... That's not how a spectrum condition like autism works.
That's why originally, for those who don't know, we were going to call the show Asperger Geeks, and Asper Geeks. But we got a comment which was very, very fairly criticizing it. It said that, hey, Asperger is no longer a disorder and most people don't identify with it. So we changed it pretty much last minute to GeekAut.
Oh yeah, I know that. Last minute. That was a very interesting. I was in bed and I just kind of saw you two talking. It's like, maybe we should change the name. I was like, changing the name now?
Yeah, like because I'm an artist. I draw and animate, so I was the one who just quickly got Photoshop up and changed the logo and stuff. But we can talk more about that later. I should introduce myself. I already said my name, Simone, and well, I was diagnosed with atypical autism, which is no longer a disorder, but that's what I was diagnosed with. I was also diagnosed with ADHD, so I come from a different perspective. Like basically, I was told that I am quote unquote mostly normal, and just have minor issues. As I got older, I realized how much my disorder affects me. When I was a kid, I grew up in a pretty abusive household with a family with a lot of flaws, and they had and still have a very toxic view on what autism is. Like they have this Rain Man, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. Like my mom would actually make Sheldon jokes to me and think that's okay. And it's like they had this very, very wrong and toxic view on what autism was, which has actually affected me. And I guess that's my story.
Thank you, Simone. And what about you, Owen?
About me? Well, to put it simply, I was much earlier diagnosed, I believe, than the both of you. This was around the time when it was, I'm not going to say it was much easier to get diagnosed, but there were much more firmer ways to get diagnosed. But I guess it's a bit easier now because people are more aware, but then it was, I wasn't going to say they were going to regroup people up, but the way I remember it going and the way I got told by my parents was that usually I'm not going to say it's a cliche, but usually if you're on the spectrum, there's a point when you are going quote unquote normally as other kids would, but then you stop at about the age of 3 or so. Like you stop communicating or you're not yourself, quote unquote. All of us, like me, my twin brother and my little brother, we all went to the Maudsley in London, which is a pretty famous special needs clinic, diagnose center, and we just got told we got what was called childhood autism. And unlike the other two, I don't think childhood autism actually existed. It's not been made redundant. It was always redundant. Maybe I figured out at one point that maybe childhood autism is what they call people who they might expect to improve, but they're not going to say it because there are people who don't quote unquote act the way is widely known in this, as others are in the spectrum, or like stereotypes of people in the spectrum. For example, I'm crap at math. I'm horrible. But then I got told the usual things. I wasn't going to end up much. I wasn't going to do much with my life because I was going to be constantly looked after. But somehow through pure luck, I got put into primary school, the final couple years of primary school. And I followed that up to go from all across mainstream school to university where I got a journalism degree. So that's kind of a nice little thing where it's like, oh, I'm not going to achieve anything. I got a journalism degree. The only problem is I got the journalism degree when journalism was falling down and the economy was going. So that was great timing by me. Awesome.
But you did it. Though.
Yeah, no, I'm very proud of that. But I always just remember the classes when they're like, I think it was near the end of our third year where they said, you are graduating at a terrible time. It's like, we know. The economy died like 2 years before. What do you think we're doing? I guess these things have a way of working out, and it is kind of working out in some ways. Like, usually we'd be talking about, and I think for this particular thing, we should, like, have a turn and talk about what have we been up to? What stuff have we been playing or doing? Because we've got the diagnosis stuff out of the way, so people understand who we are.
Yeah. First up, just so people know, Owen and me use he/him pronouns. And Simone, which do you use?
Ah, good shot.
I use she and here, and also use they, them, and she, her. And just for the easiness sake, we can go with she, her, because people will associate my feminine voice as she, her.
Cool.
So to make it a bit easier,
Yeah, I should.
because I'm non-binary, but I also doesn't fully react like femininity, even though I don't always identify with it.
Alright, cool. Well, since I'm already talking, I can say what I've been up to. Aside from, school stuff, I've been watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's one of my favorite comedies.
I've watched that too recently.
So that's fun. I've been watching some pro wrestling, which I like. And Owen does as well. Sorry for outing you as a pro wrestling
You out?
fan.
How dare you, Al? You have to give me permission to do that. But people would think I'm a decent person till now.
Yeah, no, I'm dragging you down to my level, buddy. And I've recently started playing Puzzle Dragons on the DS. So that's fun. I'm also enjoying Metopia. And, school stuff. I'm busy with math, which I'm very bad at, by the way.
Are we all bad at math? Because I think Simone might be alright because she's a developer. She used to work with numbers.
I'm okay. I'm actually pretty good at math.
Well, at least one of us lives up to the stereotype.
I make up for both of you.
Yeah.
Math is firmly represented on this
That's
podcast.
Good. We're never going to talk about it, but it's good that if it never comes up.
Well, I've actually played a few games. I played Little Nightmare, I think it's called, and I can't pronounce this, but it's called Paradigm. Paradigm, thank you. And I played some of it, and I didn't like either game. I thought Paradigm was trying a bit too hard to be funny, and Little Nightmares annoyed me because I liked all the creepy stuff, but I was really bad at the gameplay. I kept dying. But otherwise, I've been drawing. Me and Jelle, the person who was on my developer team, we're just two people, and they have been coding some more on our game. So I got to play another prototype today and yesterday, and I'm drawing a spaceship for a friend who is going to put it on her book cover of an ebook she wrote. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Spaceships.
That's
Sounds
cool.
Good.
Yeah. What have you been up to, Owen?
Well, besides I'm doing a higher degree in web development, which is taking up my time because I have to learn about computer networks and Java and JavaScript, which are apparently different things for reasons I don't understand.
That sounds confusing.
Yeah,
that is.
Those are two different kind of coding languages.
Yeah, like Java is about constructing a program, and JavaScript is design based for a website.
Yeah.
So it's rather bizarre.
Yeah, sort of. That's how you can explain it. I'm not like I should explain it. I'm not a coder on our team. I'm the artist, but I have some experience with coding, and like people mostly associate JavaScript with old browser games and old Adobe programs like Flash Animate.
Yeah, but it kind of is and it kind of isn't, because you like JavaScript is in some ways like some of the foundations of some of the external stuff on websites. There's a lot to it, and I have to construct a website for my final project. So I'm doing that and all the other glorious stuff where we learn about networks and cables and doing a little bit of programming on stuff. And it's fun. Well, I actually do have fun. I like to bounce between a few things. I'm very bad with my backlogs because sales come up and I sometimes get stuff on sales. But I have been bouncing between Overwatch. I got Shadow of War on one of the sales, so I played a bit of that because I completed all of Mordor. I was completing all of Arkham Knight the other day. I have some stuff, yeah. No, I mean I've been trying to jump in between stuff to keep myself busy as well, to not get myself fully engrossed in work.
Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah, but I sometimes just end up watching YouTube stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I am interested in doing more proper gaming. That's why we've got the Twitch channel,
Twitch channel.
which is the
yeah,
excuse
I'm gonna
to
be,
yeah.
I'm gonna be co-hosting
Yeah,
that.
it's gonna be my excuse to go through some of the games and playing with people. Or
So I can make bad puns.
yeah,
To
That's
make
what-
to make
what you
up for the
do.
lack of Alvin.
Excuse me, that's
then
gimmick infringement, and I'm going to sue you.
well, you're not here. You're not on the stream, so
Excuses, excuses.
Yeah, and probably complain about all the sexism if there is anything. Yeah,
all that stuff.
like I'm very allergic to tit windows, the boob windows. Like I'm desperately allergic to them.
So basically, the first game we're going to play is Dragon's Crown by Vanillaware.
What? I don't have that on the PS4, so no. And I don't have
wow, that would be
I don't
nice.
think anybody has a Vita connection kit either. So
I would like cringe out. I would lose my ability to cringe. My face would just get stuck like that after we played that. I think it would be the death of me. I would always look a bit angry whenever I went somewhere
Oh,
after that.
fine. We can just play Hooney Pop instead.
Okay, that's much better. Thank you, Alvin, for your good suggestions.
you're not even gonna be on the thing, so yeah. I'm trying to think about what we could first play, but maybe that'll be something I'll announce over Twitter and Facebook. So I'll figure
that's a
that
good
out.
idea.
I'll promote it. I'll let people know. Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about it because then I can. Well, I also want to show off some of my favorite stuff. I'm a big fan of 88 Heroes. If anybody's heard of 88 Heroes, because I played it at a convention. It's a platformer game. It's strange. Like if you take the different character abilities of Overwatch, make them wackier, put them in a platformer, and then when you die, you change to a different character, but you don't know their skills until they come out.
That sounds cool.
So and the stages are designed so that you can like take advantage of the abilities. So you could have a character that can fly, so you can fly him all the way up around some of the parts of the level and go to the exit. Or you could have a character that, like one of the best ones is a zombie. So if you drop the zombie's head and you go over to another part and you're jumping around, you die. That's basically another life, because then you can bring back the zombie comes back as a whole zombie, and you can keep doing it again until you mess up and you forget to do the head thing. So that's a neat idea. I might play that
Yeah,
first,
that sounds cool.
maybe. I don't know.
That sounds cool. I'd love to comment alone and make terrible
Yeah.
puns.
There'll be plenty of... Actually, there's plenty of terrible puns in the game itself. So it'll be
Oh,
added.
great! I
Yeah.
have like company and inspiration.
It's pretty good.
Excellent.
So yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll get that out. We'll let you all know.
Yeah. So what has happened? I know what we're about to talk about, but there was a thing that happened from a person who became very famous for something very bad they did. I cannot pronounce his name, but maybe someone else can.
I believe it's Alwyn. No.
Oh yeah, Alvin New something.
Yeah.
My name is
he's a
Alvin
right
Nason.
What?
Okay.
No.
It's Dutch.
Oh, okay.
Learn to love it.
Yes. So, like the topic of the day. So I'll put some context. When I was thinking about what we should talk about, I was originally, and I've said this to them before, I'll just say it out. We were originally going to do like autism screenings and autism hours and moles and stuff, and how we felt about that. But then the lovely people at The Guardian decided to have an interview with a man named James Damore. And if you're not familiar, James Damore used to work for Google. And I'll try and put it as simply as possible. There was a report that came out from Google. Was it officially from Google, or was it just from this guy?
No, it was a memo inside
was a memo,
of Google.
yeah. That was basically...
The infamous Google memo.
Yeah, that was essentially going, that women...
Women are biologically inferior and at creating programs, at coding. Like it was eugenics spiced with misogyny, spiced with racism, spiced with like reactionary dude bros on the internet. Like It was a cake fest of terribleness.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember trying to sit down and read the entire memo. And I remember just getting this terrible headache as I was reading, because I just kept rubbing my template going, oh no, at all of it. Like, because basically the alt-right, and including the KKK, basically painted this guy up as a hero. He was the hero against political correctness because he said women are biologically inferior, and also said a bunch of very racist things. I don't remember if he said racist things or if he just took the support of people who did. Like the KKK, at least some people who supported and were in the KKK, basically came out and defended him, and he just took to them and was like, yeah, thank you.
From what I remember, he wasn't so much like saying anything, but I could be remembering this all wrong. It was more like he was putting the, let's say, the likes out, so to speak, like when you put a like and you can see that. But I don't remember, like, if we're wrong about that, then feel free to tell us. But I don't remember it was just more that he was throwing the support out.
Some of the trouble is that a lot of it is gone now, because a lot of the accounts that came out in support of him were also doing harassing things, so they were suspended. So those accounts are gone, many of them, which they tend to do. Either way, he did basically everything wrong. Like, there was a chance he could have saved his career if it just went like, if he apologized, if he asked, listened to people criticizing him. But he basically went the absolute opposite of doing that.
Yep.
Which is what we're leading into today.
Yes, because The Guardian did an interview with him. And I tried to read the entirety of that one. I read most of it. But again, I got this terrible headache for some reason.
I think from the moment, I was trying to read it myself. I think from the moment he said, like, about autism, I'm like, I can't read any more of this. I'm closing the window. I don't need this in my life. I'm pretty happy without it.
Yeah, like, I've tried multiple times to just sit down from head to bottom and read it all. And I've gotten most of it, but it gives me this headache because he says, I don't know the article well enough to just directly quote stuff, but basically he's trying to avoid taking responsibility for what he said. He is trying to hint towards that his autism makes him different, and that's why he said those things, which is incredibly irresponsible because the Google memo is still being circulated by powerful people. There's still powerful people in tech looking at the Google memo saying, maybe he's right. Like, there are people taking the memo seriously just because he's another man. Like, other men in the tech industry are taking this terrible memo seriously. He's done something terrible for equality in the tech industry. The memo has hurt people in a way that's going to affect us for years. Because it started discussions behind closed doors that basically say, maybe women are biologically inferior. And by trying to blame his disorder, he is not taking consequences. He's trying to avoid taking the consequences and taking responsibility for what he said. And that's incredibly, it's so insulting to other autistic people who try to be good people, try to do right, who sometimes might mess up, may sometimes even say things that are sexist or racist, because sometimes a thought just pops up and we open our mouth without thinking. And sometimes this means that isms gets out. But there's a difference between making a mistake and trying to blame your disorder for the mistakes you made. It is very insulting to autistic people to have someone do that, especially something as terrible as trying to avoid taking responsibility for the Google memo.
Exactly, because here's the thing. Whether it is, memos like the Google memo or accidentally making an inappropriate comment, mistakes can happen. And when you're autistic, it's easier to make mistakes. Because, there can be all kinds of factors. Maybe you're in a busy place and someone says something and you say something back and it turns out it was inappropriate. That sucks. So it's easier for autistic people to make mistakes. But we're still responsible, right? Because it's like
Exactly.
if I don't wear my glasses, I I can't see properly. If I walk into something while not wearing my glasses, I'm still responsible for walking into the person. Now, if the other person that I walked into thinks, oh hey, he wasn't wearing his glasses, so it's okay, then it's up to them. But it's not up to me to decide whether or not what I did was okay or not. I can't decide how something affects someone else.
Exactly. Like we are still responsible for the consequences, even if it was a mistake. Because when people try to excuse their behavior, they're trying to avoid the consequences. But like, and of course, this become like a philosophy debate. Like, are you responsible for something that's a mistake? I would say yes. And as long as you don't try to mend that mistake by being honest and changing and trying to become better, you're what are you trying instead? You're just trying to avoid the consequences. Because a lot of what this guy Damore, like what I felt a lot of his motivation was, it wasn't to try to rectify what he said. It was trying to, in hindsight, to avoid the consequences, because he basically wrote the memo and now he's bummed that he can't work in tech anymore. He's trying to backpedal, but also not backpedal, because he refuses to like even acknowledge what he did, like not fully. He's still trying to like hint towards it being his disorder, which I found very offensive when I was reading the article. And like, I don't think he deserves to work in tech, and it seems that he doesn't even understand fully what he's done, and he doesn't want to.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you this, Owen. You and me, we're both cis dudes, and every summer we go to a convention called Nine Worlds, and we produce content there. And Nine Worlds is a safe space on pretty much every level you can imagine. And there especially it's important to make sure you don't say stuff like, you know what, women are inferior to men. So how do you, as an autistic man, make sure that you don't things don't end up in tears, basically.
To put in a wider context of things, I used to, when I was in primary school, and I think it was just because I was a younger kid, used to be very much like outspoken and saying how I felt in my head, and saying the stuff that I thought was justified because other people were saying it, I guess. And then when it came to secondary school in the UK at least, like, is very much, there's a dramatic shift. You go from like inquisitive child to, you have to grow up and be ready for your GCSEs. You have to be ready for your A levels, stuff like that. So you have to be I'll say a better person. I think that's the right term to put it, even though they're all preparing you for studying. They're not preparing you to get into the world, and embrace other people and embrace other cultures besides your casual events. Like for me, and I'm still learning this stuff at times, because like you're not used to it in your head. You're not surrounded by it most of the time. Like, I was lucky I was in a multicultural study, but even then I didn't understand a multicultural society until I went to sixth form college. Because my secondary school was in Seven Kings, and if any of our listeners ever been to Seven Kings, it's a very diverse place, but the schools aren't diverse because they're wearing uniforms, and very rarely they, like, it was only recently, it was only recently at that time, and it still was one of the things that I think made my RE easier to get a good grade for, was when they decided to go from all religions to just Christianity. Now, trying to remember the Bible compared to, say, the Quran or other scripted text is a very different thing. And I'd say it's much easier to remember the Bible because it's part of our cultural osmosis, put it that way. But I feel like in that time, I'm a very sensitive person. So if I made somebody feel bad, I'd resent myself for it. So it was especially coming in when we were naming this podcast, when we changed the name as we were doing this, that, I didn't want to make people feel like they couldn't listen to this podcast because they weren't Asperger's, whatever that even means anymore. I mean, in terms of Nine Worlds, it's still a learning process because you still get the pronouns wrong sometimes, but then the best thing to do with that is to apologize and not do it again. Like you learn about different
mistakes.
Yeah, like if and I'm not saying they would, but if they took it the wrong way, then that would be on them. And I try to keep that off myself because I feel like with everybody there, they're still learning and adjusting to different, not just different cultures, but different genders and different things like that.
With genders, one thing that I feel is that we didn't choose to have the idea of only two the idea of only two genders. There was something forced on us as children, and our brains are going to automatically jump to either categorizing someone as she or he, because that's what we were trained to do before we were old enough to even consent towards it. So personally, if someone misgenders me or it happened very rarely since I do present myself as female, but it happened a few times that people have called me he, and I always feel like I don't blame them personally because this need to identify someone as either he or she, it's something that we didn't choose. It's like a wound, like a cultural wound. So as long as their intentions are pure and they learn from their mistakes, I personally think it's okay. Like, I forgive someone, and I know a lot of people who feel the same way.
Yeah, and I think my fundamental point was I've always tried to, especially in the last few years I've been going to Nine Worlds and stuff, I've always tried to, because some of these topics are very massive, and if we discussed them on this podcast, we'd be here all day.
We would.
But to at least get the core fundamentals, or even as simply as, and one of the handy things about Nine Worlds is that people go around with badges or stickers. It used to be badges, but then that was too expensive, understandably. But stickers make more sense. And to be able to, at least recognize that and go in your head, okay, someone thinks of, their pronoun is she or her, that's what I'm going to refer them as. But if they're they, then it's fine, to say they or say whatever. It just depends on what they feel is right. Or even, for me, sometimes it's just the case of just saying they, just saying, oh, look at my even if they are, say, stereotypically female, or if you still say they, even as going, oh, they're a really cool person, then that's fine, until you get a bit more
don't assume.
Yeah, don't assume until they make it clear to you what they like to go as. But it's even it's still like a descriptive, even outside of a pronoun sense, that's still how you can describe that's how you can describe a person, even if they have a gendered pronoun. Say, oh, she's really cool. They do, game development or whatever they end up doing. So that's it's still something you can stretch into it, even if it takes some time to embrace it a bit more. Like, you still throw it out there as a way of doing it. I think fundamentally, I'm a very sensitive person. I don't want to make people feel inferior, feel like crap. And I'm always happy to listen if something like that does happen, because that's never my intention.
Because I want to build on that, and maybe, you know, to get away a bit from the pronoun discussion. Because lots of people think that autistic people are inherently antisocial, and that's not the case. The thing is, lots of autistic people do enjoy social interactions. It's just a case of we can get overloaded. You know, we can get a sensory overload, and
too much impressions.
Too much impressions, and you know, having to, because especially people who know that they are autistic, they try to put an extra effort to make sure to, you know, follow the social rules. So even a small social interaction can be very exhausting, which can lead to you know, autistic people become a bit agitated as the social interaction progresses. And it can also lead to autistic people rather avoiding social interactions, because even though they would enjoy them, others aren't mindful to them being autistic. So, you know, because social interaction can involve, you know, lots of direct eye contact, lots of touching, you know, because, for example, lots of my friends, they greet each other by hugging, but not everyone likes to hug, and for autistic people, it can, you know, be, it can lead to stuff like anxiety, or being like, hey,
some autistic people are very sensitive to touch.
Exactly.
And it can even feel like pain.
Exactly, but it's also a thing where you might feel like bringing that up can be seen as petty, or something. You know, the fear is there. So
the fear that people will judge
that people will judge you, or be like, you know, don't be so childish. We're friends, right? You know, that's what friends do. It can be dismissed. People can be very dismissive towards autistic people, and that can lead to, you know, wanting to not hang around with, you know, dismissive people. So and you know, so that's why I think the stereotype, at least for a bit, comes from that autistic people aren't social. Well, you know we are, because we're talking to each other. Hey, look at us, we're being social. So that out of the way there.
But we're talking to each other from a distance.
Fair enough, but we've talked in real life as well.
That's a key difference.
That's true. We all hang out. For those who don't know, we all hang out at this year's Geekfest, London Geekfest.
Yeah, 9 Worlds.
9 Worlds.
So to bring it back to Damore, I think his name is pronounced. He wanted to.
I prefer douchebag, but you know, that's not his actual name.
Well, he is. The thing is, he wants to excuse his antisocial behavior, which inherently it is. It's antisocial behavior with antisocial and bigoted views. He wants to excuse this with autism. He's like, well, because I'm autistic, I view the world differently. And while I sometimes view the world differently, you know, because, you know, autistic people, they tend to process information differently. Those differences are usually something like, you know what, I enjoy spinny things, you know, because
or I enjoy queuing trains, is what I did.
Exactly.
Like queuing trains.
You know, it's playing with stuff differently. What it doesn't do is like, I think the half the population of the world is inherently inferior because of these reasons. Because that's not, it isn't his autism that's making him say that, you know.
Exactly.
Because if that were the case, it would be much more common among autistic men than it is among non-autistic men. But it's not an autism problem, it's a men problem.
Yeah, exactly. Because if his logic would have anything to do with having autism, a lot more autistic people would just be raving misogynists. And most autistic men aren't raving misogynists. It's rather than an autistic problem. It's like you said, it's a man problem.
If anything, like autistic men are more comfortable with women, because in the services I have been to or been cared in or worked at, there are more women than men. So, and even women of different cultures and diversities, to the point where, and I'm not saying there hasn't been that stuff coming out. I mean, I haven't heard some of it. It probably has happened. But then, that doesn't happen because what they're thinking in their heads is this person is caring for me and I'm comfortable with them. And like, regardless of, their race or like their age even, like they're doing their job and I'm comfortable with them. So if anything, like, this is against the stereotype because because of those experiences.
Yeah, but I have to say about this, and I think Simone, you also have something to say about that, is that the whole notion boys will be boys also is applied to autistic boys, and it's not because you, Simone, you know about situations where the bad behavior by autistic guys was excused by other people and not so much themselves, right?
Yeah, I can actually tell a story about that. I wrote an article about this, and I can try linking it in the description to stuff in case other people want to check it out. But I wrote about this, and I've named them all Mike because I made up a name. And I can tell a story about this. Like, I used to live at a student home for autistic people, and they were doing work on the ventilation system. And they've basically removed the big ventilation drum from the roof of the downstairs bathroom. And one day, when I was going in to shower, I go in. I turn off the faucet without getting in, which was very good, because when I turn around to get my towel, there's an arm sticking down with a video camera, or with the phone with the camera side on. And it turned out that one of the boys who lived upstairs in one room had taken his camera down to attempt to videotape me in the shower. This behavior was excused on him being a boy. Like, him violating me and my privacy and my body and my like everything. Like, it was very...
That's awful.
Harrowing. It was
awful.
very harrowing when it happened. It's like and he would have gotten like a full shot of me if I hadn't. I wasn't undressed, which was very lucky, but I could have been. And these kind of tiny things happened all the time. Like, there was another girl that living this. Let's call her Bea, or I can call her Beatrice. Like, Beatrice, one of the boys had fallen in love with Beatrice, and it ended up with him demanding to be with her all the time. So at one point he stood kicking her door, screaming at her to open the door, or he basically threatened her because he had fallen in love with her. So he demanded that no one else would be alone with her. And this kind of stuff happened regularly, and every single time it was excused on them being boys. Like, a third one, there's so many stories. A third one we caught stealing from us. He stole about 3,000 Swedish kroner of stuff from me, which is a lot. It would be about, I think, like $300, 300 or something, if I translate it directly. He stole basically a lot of stuff. He stole a web camera, he stole a computer from me, he stole money out of my purse, and he stole a video game from me. And he stole from everyone, and this went on for about 4 years.
What?
And about 4 years, and we kept telling it, and the only thing they kept telling us was lock the door. So we had to start locking a door when we were just going to the bathroom, because he would steal.
So let me get this straight. You lived in student housing. Was it regular student housing or also autistic student housing?
It was for only autistic student housing, but there was a scheme going on where they actually accepted people who children with child services. So we got a lot of troubled kids who were not autistic because they were cheating them into the system.
Ugh. But
Like,
but
yeah.
let me
Jeez.
let me just summarize. You lived in what was essentially protected student housing for autistic students. And what happened was, over the course of 4 years, one person kept stealing and intruding and being threatening and even going
Yeah.
so far as to hide a camera in the women's bathroom. And it
Yeah.
kept being excused with, well, that's just because he's a guy.
Yeah. Well, all of these things doesn't happen by the same
Okay.
person. There was 3 different people. Just like example, what they did. Like one of the boys, I remember because I had a room next to him because we actually moved the studio home to another location. And when we were in the previous place, I had a room next to him, and in the middle of the night, I would get this terrible tobacco smell. And one day, I was looking outside, and I saw the asshole next to me stand with 1 foot on the window frame and a cigarette in his hand. He was smoking in his room. And I reported this, and nothing happened.
Ugh.
Like when these trouble kids, like one of the student matron, or what you call it, the matron of the place. I don't know how to translate it. She would she would say, "We're all a big family." She would keep saying this. We're all a big family. She was more concerned with being friends with the students than being a boss. Like, I have one funny thing that happened, even though it was bad. It was, I asked her, this is a student home where a lot of people have medication. Shouldn't there be a medication cabinet, like one that you can lock? And she said, no, we trust each other here. A few weeks later, my antidepressant was gone. It turned out that one of the troubled kids had stolen my antidepressant and was selling it on the street. So after that, they just silently installed a medicine cabinet and never spoke of it again.
Jeez.
Because that was the kind of student home she was running. Like, there was so much stuff that happened there. Like, there was one girl who was not the smartest person in the world that once asked me if I could sleep on the floor in her room because she's gotten convinced that there was a ghost in the school next door baking pancakes.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a very specific fear. It's like, and I'm assuming just someone like a teacher or a janitor was there off hours doing something, but she was so convinced, and it's like she was so selfish that she didn't ask if she could sleep in my room on the floor. She asked me if I could sleep on her floor because she was afraid. She had no like empathy. I don't know, that place, like, I was there the longest of everyone. And I had a trauma from all those years. Like I had a period where I started getting sick, like mentally. I later I turned out I was depression from exhaustion. And like one time when I refused to go to school because I was so tired, she called basically Swedish version of 999. I believe it's 999 in UK. Basically, for American listeners, it's the Swedish version of 911. So there came an ambulance, and then she put me in front of the ambulance and said, "Explain to these people why you're wasting their time.
What?
Explain to these people why you are preventing them from saving lives. Explain to them why you're not going to school." She basically used 911 as a tool to punish me for not wanting to go to school. She did this twice. And it's like, it was a terrible place at the student home. I don't miss it at all. Like,
Yeah, no kidding.
and it's like, and I was abused at home too. So it's like, well, what abuse can I choose? Abuse in student home or abuse at home? I had no choice. So it's like, I came with a bunch of traumas after all those years. Like, it isn't until now where I realized that this is how it feels like to be treated with respect. because the carers at the place I live now, they actually care for me. But yeah, but that's some horror stories, some choice horror stories from my time at a student home.
Yeah.
Excellent.
some stuff.
And so I would like to say something to the audience, because with the whole topic of responsibility and stuff, if you are able to understand this podcast, you are able to understand words and what words mean. And the words "I'm not interested" and "no" and "please don't do this," you should be able to understand them as well. And the three of us want to make something perfectly clear. We will never, ever accept your or anyone's excuse that, it's okay, I did this thing because I didn't notice because I'm autistic. Okay? We understand words, we know what they mean, and we're responsible. If another person wants to forgive you for what you did because they feel that they weren't clear or there were other circumstances, that's on them. And that's just something I wanted to make perfectly clear.
Yeah, that's good. Like, there are people who, like, one thing I grew up in a lot of tiny study groups and in special ed and stuff like that with other autistic people. And one thing I realized, especially about the boys, is that some of them were groomed into excusing their behavior on the disorder.
Yeah.
Because their parents kept telling them, "Oh, I'm sorry, he's autistic." So they started saying it.
Yeah.
They started because they started, like, people, regardless if they're autistic or if they're not autistic, they will behave based on how you treat them. If you treat them like children who can't do right, they will be children who do no right.
And that we should make this clear. There are times when it's perfectly reasonable to say, because they're autistic and because of their own actions, but not because of the actions they do to other people. Like, if
of
say,
course.
if any of us weren't able to be in a social situation,
Of course.
we'll just say, it's because I'm autistic, I'm struggling. I need to
Exactly.
leave the area. But if you're using it, as Al pointed out and as Simone's pointed out, if you're using it as justification for, I'm going to steal a whole bunch of stuff and give drugs out that are important drugs for people out on the street, and that's not justification for autism, because one, that's not in the diagnoses for any of the autistic spectrum.
I'm a kleptomaniac with autism side effect.
Yeah.
Because as we know, that's what, that's the quote-unquote late Charles Manson, that's how his autism went, is because he was able to influence everybody. So no, that's not just, like, if you are talking about it from a perspective of your own social anxieties and your own understanding of work, like I had to say that when I was going on my course, then that's utterly understandable. And I feel like some people might, I'm not saying they would, but they might get the wrong idea with us saying what we're saying, that we should make it clear that, you can use stuff with your autism, but don't do it if you're, if people want you to leave you alone because you're being essentially a creep. That's not because of your autism. You don't say, well, I'm creepy because I'm autistic. No.
Yeah, like I would say that even if you have autism, a person should only have to tell you once.
Yeah, exactly.
And I get it, because we're already recording over an hour, but I would like to address this briefly. Toxic masculinity is a thing, and men.
Are we doing all the greatest hits today? We're just like hanging them all out. We don't need to do another podcast again. Toxic masculinity.
Well, Alvin, there's no trouble if we go over now.
Okay,
It's
cool.
fine.
Because I wanted to say that toxic masculinity is a thing. Yeah, and it affects autistic men just as it affects non-autistic men. And when you start,
I'd say in some cases might affect it worse.
well, exactly,
Because you're hardwired in a certain methodology, and if you think that's the right way to go, and if you're told that's the right way the world goes, you're not exactly gonna be like other people that are able to adapt and change as much. Like, I think there are exceptions. Like, I feel like I might be an exception, but other people might be an exception. But generally, if you're hardwired to understand something a certain way, and then something changes, like, say, the third wave feminism, then that might throw people off and make them rebel against it. That's not, again, to say that's always going to be the case.
Because,
that's,
I get that being lonely sucks, and then you're like, oh, hey, I want to have friends, I want to go on dates, blah, 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 stuff like that. You go on YouTube, you see all those terrible, terrible, terrible pickup artists. They're already a bad influence on people, but if you, have a tendency to take things literally, and you apply that in real life, and then you get a negative reaction, it can go a very wrong way. And I'm not trying to say that as an excuse, but toxic masculinity has a very big effect, I'd say, on autistic men. And it wouldn't even surprise me if, some autistic men are being performatively toxic masculine, if that's not proper grammar, but you know what I mean? Just like some autistic people are performatively following certain social rules, even if they don't want to, but it's supposed to be that way. And if you grow up or influenced by other, toxic toxic men, even if you don't want to, it's still quote unquote preferable to being outcast entirely. But now I'm being an armchair sociologist, and maybe I should stop. But I would like to talk about this some more in maybe a future episode. Autism and toxic masculinity. Is that an idea?
Maybe, yeah, that'd be...
Yeah, that's a good idea. I did realize that one thing we forgot to do, there was ask people if they had any questions for the podcast.
Oh, good idea.
Well, I was going to leave that to the end, because I have to reel off a whole bunch of links and stuff that people could go to. And maybe that would be a good time now.
Oh, yeah. Do people have any questions for the podcast?
Well, if they do, they can send it to our Twitter, which is Simone. What's our Twitter?
Or on our Twitter is GeekAut.
Have we forgotten the name? That took a bit longer than I would have wanted to.
Sorry. No, you pointed it out. I was going to edit out the pause. Damn it, Owen. Damn it. You caught me.
Just edit this out too. No one will ever know.
This out. So Twitter and Facebook is GeekAut Official. And so is the email address that we have on Google Mail. It's geekautofficial@gmail.com. If you have any questions, any suggestions on topics, if you want to say this is the worst podcast in the world about autistic people, go ahead. You'd be lying, because we're the best.
I used to be a moderator for erotic fan sites, which is a story I'm going to tell another time. But I love hate mail, so also send us hate mail, please.
We'll forward the hate mail to Simone.
Send me all the hate mail.
Don't send that much hate mail.
Yeah.
We also have... So what's the Twitch channel? I have to clarify this, because since we were all doing this last minute, so is it GeekAut Official on Twitch, or have we not done that yet?
We have not changed it yet.
Okay, so I will sort that out. We can keep this part in. I will put that out on the Twitter and Facebook when we have the Twitch channel sorted out. I don't know when we'll do the first stream. We'll figure that out. We'll figure out the game.
Yeah.
We'll do all this lovely stuff. But yeah, just contact us. We'll have more stuff in the works. And thank you for listening. It's been a pleasant experience. Thank you, Al.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast. Thank you. Well, I should
And you're
say.
never coming back. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
Nah,
Thank you, Simone.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was very fun.
Yeah, I had a lot
And-
of fun. Looking forward to recording the second ever episode. Oh, and by the way, also send stuff if you have, constructive criticism. Things we got wrong. Please let us know so we can
Yeah.
be better in the future.
Yes.
We
And
always want
that's
to
about
improve
it.
here. I mean, we improve so much,
Yeah.
we changed the damn name.
Yeah.
know?
Yes. Yes.
We should also hand out our
So
our
just-
personal
just
Twitter,
like-
maybe.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Where
we
can,
could- yeah.
where can we find you, Owen?
Where can you find me? I'll give you my address now. It's Dublin. No, it's at Owen Mason, spelled EOINMASON. And yeah, that's my Twitter.
That's Twitter. And where can we find you, Alvin?
Mine, well, even though we, already said it's an outdated term, my name on Twitter is at @BadassSperger. That's spelled BADASSPERGER. It's my personal brand.
Yes. And where can we find Simone? Well, you can find me at Madame Plumpette, which is spelled MADAMPLUMPETTE.
Awesome.
We're not gonna spell it out every episode, just the first
No,
one.
you have to find out afterwards.
And
We might
links will be
do
in the
this.
description below.
Yes. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next
Yeah,
week.
see you next week.
See
Okay.
ya.
Bye bye.